I want you to think about the last time the power went out in your home. You probably just grabbed your phone, maybe lit a candle, waited it out. No big deal, right? That's what I thought too. It was February in northern Minnesota. I'm talking the kind of cold that makes your nose hairs freeze the second you step outside. I just moved into a rental house on the edge of a small town called Grover Falls. Population maybe 800 people, if you counted the farms on the outskirts. I'd taken a remote job the previous fall, packed everything I owned into a U-Haul and driven away from Chicago without looking back. I wanted quiet. I wanted isolation. I got it. The house was old. Built in the 50s, the landlord said, but well maintained. It sat at the end of a gravel road about a quarter-mile from the nearest neighbor. There were trees on three sides, dense, dark Minnesota pine, and a frozen field out front that stretched until it disappeared into gray sky. I loved it the moment I saw it. I thought I was finally living the dream. This happened on February 19th. By 10 p.m. I was already in bed with a book. Then the power went out, not a flicker, not a warning, just gone. Total darkness. The kind so complete it feels like a physical thing pressing against your eyes. I didn't panic. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand. 42% battery. I pulled up the flashlight and walked to the kitchen to find the candles I'd bought when I first moved in and never thought I'd need. I found two, lit them both, and set them on the kitchen table. I called the power company. Automated message said there was an outage affecting the area and crews were working to restore service. Estimated time. Unknown. I went back to bed. Here's the thing about total darkness and total silence and total isolation. Your brain starts doing things you don't want it to do. Every sound becomes a question. The house settling, the wind pulling at the windows, the candles throwing shapes across the ceiling. I lay there staring up, trying to read, but I couldn't focus. I kept listening. Around midnight, I heard the sound that started all of it. A knock at the front door. Slow, 3 knocks, deliberate. I sat up. My first thought was a neighbor. Car trouble, maybe. Someone who needed help. This was rural Minnesota, after all, people helped each other. But it was midnight. It was below zero outside, and nobody knew me well enough to come to my door. I grabbed my phone and walked to the front of the house. I didn't open the door. I stood a foot away from it and said, "Who's there?" A man's voice, calm, almost too calm. "My truck slid off the road. I think my leg is hurt. Can you call someone?" Everything in me wanted to open that door. It's what a decent human being does. Someone is hurt, you help them. But something was wrong and I couldn't name it yet. I said, "I'll call 911 right now." "What road are you on?" Silence. A long pause, then. "I don't know the road. I can't see any signs. Please just open the door and let me use your phone." I already had my phone in my hand. I asked why he couldn't just tell me his location and let me call for him. Another pause. Then he said he didn't want to stand out in the cold any longer, that his leg was really hurting, that I was wasting time. The guilt almost worked. I said, "I'm calling now. Stay right there." And I dialed 911. The dispatcher answered on the second ring. I explained what was happening. She asked for my address. I gave it. She said she was sending a unit. Then she asked me something that stopped my blood cold. She asked if I recognized the man's voice. I said no. She told me, carefully, like she was choosing her words, that they had received 2 other calls that night from addresses within a 5-mile radius. Both were reports of a man knocking on doors during the blackout. Both callers had described the same thing. Calm voice, claimed truck accident, asked to come inside. Neither of those callers had opened their door. She told me to stay on the line, keep the door locked, and not open it for any reason. I went back to the front of the house. I could hear him still out there, not knocking anymore, just standing there, based on the sound of the snow compressing beneath shifting weight just outside the door. My porch light was out with the power. My phone flashlight couldn't reach through the door. I couldn't see anything through the peephole, just black. I stood there in the dark with a candle in one hand and my phone in the other, talking quietly to a 911 dispatcher, listening to a man breathe on the other side of my front door. It felt like it lasted an hour. Then I heard it, footsteps moving off the porch. Slow, no urgency, not like someone limping away, not like someone desperate for help heading to the next house. Just steady, calm footsteps moving through the snow and disappearing into the tree line. The sheriff arrived 11 minutes later. 2 deputies swept the property with flashlights. They found his tracks in the snow, confirmed 1 man came up the gravel road on foot. They followed the tracks into the tree line. About 60 yards in, the tracks stopped at a spot where it looked like someone had been standing for a long time, long enough to pack the snow down flat. Just standing, in the trees, in the dark, in -15-degree weather. They never figured out who he was. The tracks eventually led to a county road where a vehicle had been parked on the shoulder, tread marks in the snow, nothing else. No broken down truck, no accident, no report of any injured man found anywhere that night. The power came back on at 4 in the morning. I sat in my kitchen under every light I owned until the sun came up. I still live in that house. I still love the quiet and the trees and the distance from the rest of the world. But I put a camera on my front porch the very next day. And I have never, not once since that night, opened my door in the dark. I'd been living in the house outside Dayton, Ohio for about 8 months. Rented it cheap because the previous tenant had left in a hurry. Landlord said something vague about personal reasons and dropped the rent another $50 when I pressed him. I didn't press him again. I needed the place and I told myself old houses have history. That's just how it goes. It was mid-February. One of those nights where the wind doesn't howl, it presses. Like it's leaning into the walls, testing them. The forecast had said freezing rain, possible ice accumulation, and sure enough, around 1:45, everything went dark. I grabbed my phone, found a flashlight in the kitchen drawer, and sat down on the couch to wait it out. Power outages in that area weren't rare, usually came back within an hour. I pulled a blanket over my legs, kept the flashlight on the coffee table, and started scrolling through downloaded shows on my phone. 11 minutes in, I heard the basement door open. Now, before your mind goes somewhere else, I need to explain the layout of that house. The basement door was in the kitchen, about 20 feet from where I was sitting. It had a specific sound. The hinges were old and dry, and the door would drag slightly on the frame when it swung. I'd learned that sound the first week I moved in. I heard it every time I did laundry. There was no mistaking it. I sat completely still, phone in my hand, flashlight on the table, blanket half on my lap. My first thought, and I mean this, was that I had forgotten to latch it. Old houses, old doors. Sometimes they swing open on their own when the air pressure shifts. I told myself that for about 4 seconds. Then I heard footsteps on the kitchen floor. Slow, deliberate, not the settling of wood, not pipes, steps. I didn't move. I don't think I was even breathing. The flashlight was sitting right there, but reaching for it felt like the wrong thing to do. Like if I moved, whatever was in that kitchen would know exactly where I was. The kitchen and the living room were separated by a half wall, which meant whoever was in there was maybe 12 feet away from me in the dark. I gripped my phone and opened the keypad. Didn't dial yet, just had it ready. The footsteps stopped. That was almost worse, because then there was just silence and I was sitting there in the dark trying to convince myself I had imagined the whole thing, knowing that I hadn't. I heard breathing. Slow, steady, close enough that it didn't make sense unless someone was standing right at the edge of that half wall. I hit the flashlight button and swung it toward the kitchen. A man was standing there. He was tall, over 6 feet, wearing a dark jacket, jeans, work boots caked with mud. His face was weathered, mid-50s maybe, with a short beard and eyes that went wide the second the light hit him. He threw one arm up to block the beam. I screamed. I'm not ashamed of that. I screamed and launched off the couch and backed toward the front door in about 2 seconds flat. He said, wait, I'm not, please, I'm not here to hurt you. His voice was shaking. He looked, and I cannot believe I'm about to say this, scared. Not of me. Of something else. I had my hand on the door handle. I told him to get out. I told him I was calling the police. He said, "There's someone outside. There's someone in your yard." I came in through the basement window. It was already open. I didn't know anyone was home. Please don't go outside. I didn't know what to do with that. Your brain isn't built to process two threats at the same time. I asked him what he was talking about. He told me he'd been walking home. He lived 4 streets over, said his name was Dale, said he'd been at his brother's place and was cutting through the neighborhood, and he had seen someone in my backyard crouched near the back door, watching the house. He said when the power went out, the person had stood up and tried the handle. He said he panicked and went for the nearest entry point he could find, which was a small window on the side of my basement he'd noticed was unlatched. I was shaking so hard I could feel it in my jaw. I called 911, told them there was an intruder on my property. The dispatcher kept me on the line and had 2 units there in under 6 minutes. They found boot prints in the ice along the back of the house. Deep ones. Someone had been standing there long enough to sink into the thin layer that had formed over the mud. The back door handle had fresh scratch marks on it, the kind that don't come from keys. They didn't find the person. They did find a broken latch on my back gate, the kind of break that doesn't happen from wind. That's what the officer told me. He wasn't rough about it, but he was direct. Someone came through this on purpose. Dale gave a statement. His story checked out. His brother confirmed he'd left on foot around 11:30. The officers let him go. He shook my hand before he left and told me to get my basement window fixed. He looked like he hadn't fully processed what had happened either. I believed him then. I still believe him. I didn't sleep in that house again. I stayed at a motel for 4 days while I figured out next steps. The landlord didn't fight the lease break, didn't even ask for documentation. Just said, "I understand," and refunded my deposit within a week. That told me everything I needed to know about what he probably already suspected. The case stayed open for a while. I checked back with the department twice over the following months. No arrests, no identified suspect. What I keep coming back to, what still keeps me up sometimes, is the timing. The power went out at 11:47. If that outage had happened 20 minutes later, I probably would have been in bed, lights off, completely unaware. And whoever was standing at my back door in the dark, testing the handle, would have had enough time to do whatever they wanted. The scariest moment of my life didn't happen in the dark. It happened the second the lights came back on. This was about 2 years ago, late January, somewhere outside of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I was renting a house on the edge of a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where the houses are spread out. The yards are big, and you don't really know your neighbors by name. I worked from home, so most of my days were quiet. Just me, my laptop, and the hum of the refrigerator. That night, a winter storm had been rolling through for hours. Ice on the roads, wind rattling the windows, temperatures dropping fast. I'd made dinner early, figured I'd just hunker down and ride it out. Around 8 o'clock, I lost power. Not unusual. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, found some candles in the kitchen drawer. Normal stuff. I wasn't scared. Not even a little. What I didn't know was that someone had been watching my house for days. I found that out later, from the detective, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The first hour of the blackout was fine. I sat on my couch, phone in hand, half reading, half listening to the storm outside. The wind had picked up bad. Tree branches scraping the roof, ice ticking against the glass. The kind of sounds that make your house feel smaller than it actually is. Around 9, I noticed something. My back door, the one that leads to the yard, had a thin strip of light under it. Not a flashlight. More like a faint, distant glow. I figured it was a neighbor's generator kicking on across the yard. Made sense. I didn't get up to check. I just noted it and went back to my phone. That was my first mistake. 30 minutes later, my power came back. The lights flickered twice, then flooded on. The refrigerator hummed back to life. I exhaled, stood up, stretched, went to the kitchen to get some water, And that's when I saw it. My back door was unlocked. I stopped moving. I stood there with my hand on the faucet and just stared at that door. I am someone who locks every door every single night without fail. It's muscle memory. I'd done it that evening before the storm even started. I was sure of it, but the deadbolt was horizontal, unlocked. My brain started doing that thing where it tries to give you a logical explanation before it lets you feel afraid. Maybe I forgot. Maybe I'd gone outside earlier and didn't remember, but I hadn't gone outside, not once. The weather was brutal. I had no reason to. I walked to the door slowly, turned the deadbolt, locked it, told myself it was nothing. Then I turned around and looked at my kitchen, really looked at it, and something was wrong. I couldn't place it immediately. It was like when you walk into a room and you know something's been moved but you can't figure out what. That low, crawling feeling that the space around you is slightly off. Then I saw it. The chair at my kitchen table. It was pulled out, not all the way, just slightly. Maybe 6 inches from the table, and I eat at my couch. I never sit at that table. I hadn't touched that chair in weeks. My heart dropped into my stomach. I grabbed my phone off the counter and I went completely still and I listened. The storm was still loud outside. Wind, ice, the occasional crack of a tree branch. But underneath all of that, I was trying to hear anything inside the house. I heard nothing. But that didn't make me feel better. I called 911. I told the dispatcher my door had been unlocked and I thought someone might have been inside. She stayed calm, kept me calm, told me to get to a room I could lock and wait. I went to my bedroom, locked the door, pushed a chair under the handle, and sat on the floor with my back against the bed, listening to every single sound in that house. The police arrived in about 12 minutes. 12 minutes felt like 2 hours. They cleared the house. Nobody inside. No one hiding in closets under beds in the garage. Whoever had been there was gone, and the officer confirmed it without any doubt someone had been there. There were wet boot prints on my kitchen floor near the back door, faint but visible under the kitchen light. 2 sets of prints. Someone had come in and gone back out. They'd been inside my house during the blackout. The detective I spoke to the next morning told me they believed it was a team, 2 people working together. The theory was that they'd cut the power to the neighborhood using the utility box at the end of my street, which had been tampered with. They'd been scoping houses in that area for at least a week before. One of my neighbors, 3 houses down, had actually had things stolen the week prior. Small things. The kind of things you don't notice are gone right away. In my house, they hadn't taken anything. At least nothing I could identify. But they'd been there. They'd walked through my kitchen, pulled out that chair, maybe to stand on it, maybe to look at something, and then they left when the power came back on and the lights exposed them. The detective told me they believe I came into the kitchen at the wrong moment. That if I hadn't walked in when I did, they might have kept going through the house. I think about that a lot. They never caught them. That case is still open as far as I know. I moved out of that house within a month, couldn't stay there. Every time the lights flickered, my whole body would go rigid. But here's the thing that stays with me. The thing I can't shake even now. They cut the power on purpose. They planned it. They knew that darkness makes people passive, makes people sit still, stay put, assume they're safe because they're inside and the door is locked. They used the storm as cover and they used the blackout as a tool. And they almost got away with it. Lock your doors. Check them twice. And when the lights come back on, don't just exhale. Look around first. If these stories kept you up tonight, hit that subscribe button right now. Leave a comment below. Tell me if you've a story of your own, something that happened to you. I read every single one. Stay safe out there. And maybe double check your locks tonight.